So if you could each just introduce yourself, tell us your name, just tell us your latest book, and tell us what you've been doing the last 20 years, just a very short introduction, and then we'll go to questions. And let's do it in order so that it follow the same order. So why don't we go Dr. Pai, David Wolfe, Dr. Curatola, Clinton Ober, and Dr. Goldhamer. Why don't we follow that order? So Dr. Pai, you can lead off.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Sunil Pai. I'm actually an integrative medicine physician, so I'm not alternative. I was one of the first formally trained integrative medicine physicians with Dr. Andrew Well over 22 years ago in University of Arizona. We look at evidence-based practices. So everything that we use, conventional or natural, indigenous, we're looking at the blend of improving the patient's outcomes, not being stuck on a certain modality or, this is a drug or not a drug, or this is something natural or not natural. For us, it's always about looking at what's the evidence that's out there, what is safe and effective, and then can we look at more natural means, things with dietary, lifestyle, epigenetic changes to move people to better health. My book is An Inflammation Nation, which I wrote, a bestseller book on the 10 definitive steps on reversing and preventing all diseases with use of diet, lifestyle, and natural anti-inflammatories. And over the last couple of years, we've just been growing. We have a integrated clinic in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we're expanding our services. And I do Zoom consultations for people all around the world. And we're actually going to be looking at making the book into a documentary. So hopefully that will be coming out soon.
Okay, I guess I'll kick off next. I'm David Avocado Wolfe, and I am actually an avocado grower. I've been growing avocado since 1978. Started in San Diego near the border and continue to this day here in Texas and in Hawaii. My passion has been raw foods, veganism, vegetarianism, going with less, fasting. I'm on day 5 of a water fast right now, feeling really good. I finally got through it was a little rough. I stayed up all night last night. Sometimes you can have a problem with fasting and that you actually have too much energy. That was last night. Anyway, we're going to focus here on practical solutions for folks out there. And I'm a really big advocate of just the simple stuff, going organic, being plant-based, having a positive mental attitude, getting the right types of exercise for your body, and staying grounded.
And I'm next up. I'm Dr. Gerald Curatola, and I'm a biologic dentist. I actually did the program at Harvard Medical School in complementary and alternative medicine, which was now integrative and then functional. But I followed the biologic medical path, and that took me to Switzerland and Germany. My life mission is to change the way dentistry is practiced universally and to help people to understand the importance of this, which is the mouth-body connection. Your mouth is a mirror and also a gateway to health and disease in the entire body. 90% of toxicity and inflammation in the body originates in your mouth. So, I always say the mantra for me, the 800-pound gorilla in the room is your mouth. And you can detox, water fast, and do everything you want. If your mouth is a mess, you cannot be healthy. So I'm excited to be with some really good friends here and some brilliant practitioners.
I guess I'm next. My name is Clint Ober, and I'm a cowboy from Montana, really. But I spent 30 years in the communications industry. And one day I accidentally learned that when you ground the human body, pain automatically resolves. And this was back in 98, 99. This is before the word inflammation entered the scene, and had no idea what it was, what the mechanisms were, didn't have a background in biology. But anyhow, I spent the last 25 years supporting and producing clinical and proof of concept studies. I think we have 25 peer-reviewed published studies now. And they all, and as a group, as a whole, what they suggest is you can't have inflammation in a grounded body, meaning a body that's grounded, electrically connected to the earth. To put a metaphor for that would be like the animals who live in the wild. They don't have cardiovascular disease. They don't have cancer. They don't have anything. But yet the animals who live with their owners indoors, they manifest all of the same health disorders as their owners. 50% of them die from cancer, just like their owners. So anyhow, I tried to put a knowledge base, a working base behind all of this, so that it's so simple, it's pathetic. But on the other hand, it's complicated enough because no one's ever heard of it. And it's really a challenge to believe that being electrically connected to the earth can affect your physiology. But when you're grounded, you're negative. When you're not grounded, you're positive, and you can't have inflammation in a 100% grounded body. But anyhow, so I ran into Dr. Stephen Sinatra back in 2004, ran into David Wolfe around 2008. And between the three of us, and with the help of a large group of researchers and so on, we have brought this to the world.
Thank you. Dr. Goldhamer?
I'm Alan Goldhamer. I run the True North Health Center, which is a 70-bed inpatient facility that focuses on medically supervised water-only fasting. We have a multidisciplinary group of doctors that works with a lot of people that are sick, trying to get well, or that are well and trying to stay that way. We're also a research facility. We do clinical controlled trials. We have been successful, particularly recently, at publishing a number of papers in peer-reviewed journals. There'll be a bunch more coming out this year. And we've really looked at the different aspects of fasting, its safety, its application, conditions that respond to fasting, and are trying to encourage patients that when they're done fasting to adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet so they can maintain the results long-term.
Thank you. If each of you could go in a time machine back to yourself when you were 15 years old, but you only had 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes to talk to your 15-year-old, and it was your only chance you could ever do it, and you wanted to give him the best overall possible advice on preventing disease and staying healthy, what exactly, as specifically as you can, he's 15, you got to give him the most direct, simple advice. You got 5 minutes, really, maybe 10. What exactly do you want to say to your 15-year-old that he's got to then remember to follow for the rest of his life to prevent health? What's the most important things? You could tell him anything. If each of you could answer this, what would be the protocol, the program, the things you want to tell him? You have one chance to give him, impart this information, and you don't want it to be super complicated. He's only 15, and he's got to use this as guiding him from everything you know now about what he could do and should do to stay healthy for the rest of his life. If each of you would answer that. We could go in the same order that we went the first time.
All right. So I would tell myself, going back in time, say to go plant-based much sooner. Try to eat as much organic as possible, ensuring that you're doing stress reduction techniques, living with community. Look, I'd encourage myself to look up or think of this concept of epigenetics: diet, lifestyle, environment, belief system. And if you change those 4 major categories, and there are subcategories to them, but really the diet's the largest contributing factor in general for about 82% of condition. So if you can get that underhand, then everything else is just fine tuning over time. That's what I tell myself.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell him? And just anything about supplements, anything about anything specific that it's got to last him his whole life that you want?
It's everything has to do with inflammation, in my opinion. And so you have to look at everything that affects inflammation, from the environment, from even, your thoughts to your food. And so, looking at natural anti-inflammatories or things like bosmeric that we give, that is a natural anti-inflammatory. But really, if we change the epigenetics, then all those things are needed less. So the goal is, can we, if I'm 15, I wouldn't necessarily need it as much as I would as I'm older. So yeah, but using it, living in an anti-inflammatory lifestyle is key. And there is natural anti-inflammatories people can take that will, like bosmeric, that would help lower and prevent those things from occurring. But the diet is still number one.
Thank you.
It's David next.
Fantastic. Well, first thing I would get into is to go more into what I was always into, which is planting trees and eating as much of the food that I was growing as possible. So more avocados, more figs, more citrus, all those wonderful things, growing as much food in terms of vegetables as possible. And of course, going as organic as possible. I didn't really become organic until I was like 19 years old. So it took that long, you know, and there's a lot that happens in that developmental phase if you're not organic in terms of exposure. Then I would say the water quality of what I was drinking back then was poor, even though we had filtered water in our house, still very poor. And what else? I would say the grounding was really a big thing. So being barefoot on the earth, being barefoot at the beach, being barefoot whenever you can, swimming in the ocean, swimming in bodies of the water. And I would have probably got myself more into the cold water plunging and the Wim Hof method when I was younger. I've always had a natural proclivity for it. So I think I would have been able to inspire myself to get back into that earlier rather than later.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would talk to my 15-year-old about understanding that we are mind, mouth, body, spirit. So in that mind, body, spirit thing, the first thing I'd say is management of stress. I think 15-year-olds right now are so in danger of not outliving their parents because of what they're bombarded with. I mean, just the digital world they're in, this constant contact. I would really encourage a meditative practice, you know, and I'd talk about diet and nutrition are a cornerstone, you know, just taking sugar out is like, sugar is, I think, probably one of the biggest causes of inflammation in terms of diet and nutrition. And there's so many hidden sugars. So I like to call the diet that I recommend AAA, alkalizing, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant rich. Avocados, there's not enough omegas that kids are consuming. So when we get into mind, body, but then, you know, on the spirit side, they need to understand they have this 1.5 foot field that extends from their body, and they really need to be aligned. And having that kind of balance in their life is more than diet and nutrition and more than physical fitness. It's really about being aligned and being aligned right down, you know, every chakra from the crown, which connects to source. I see patients all the time that come to me to get well with all kinds of systemic problems. But if they have stinking thinking and they're not connected, what I'm doing is really something mechanical that doesn't have a long-standing, profound influence. So really helping 15-year-olds open up and be connected in all of those elements of their being, and understanding that they have this life force that has a divine purpose on this planet is something that I've learned as a practitioner, and being a biologic dentist got me more connected to understanding not just the body, but the mind and spirit connection to that as well.
Thank you.
Well, and I'm 78, so when I was 15, it was 1958 or 59. And back then I was living on a ranch, and I was a cowboy, and cowboy is somebody who sits on a horse and rides a herd, just watches the cows and looks at them all the time, make sure they're healthy and happy. If you see one that's not acting like the rest of the herd, you have to pull them out of the herd and then go ride the pasture and find out, you know, are there some noxious weeds? Is the water bad? Is there a dead animal upstream, or something in that pasture is making that cow sick? And you have to move the cattle to a different section of the pasture, whatever. But the concept behind all of it is prevention. If you keep the pasture clean and pristine, then the cows will be healthy. And if the cows are healthy, then you can go to the market and make some money. If they aren't, then you call the vet and the banker and toss the keys up and say, here, you own it, we're out of here. Because there's no way you can make money if you got sick animals. So, but anyhow, Back then, I was organic and I didn't know it because everything we ate came out of the garden or was something we raised. The only thing we ever bought at the store was, I remember occasionally in the holidays and stuff, they would buy sugar and make cakes and all that kind of stuff. But generally, we didn't have sugar. The only thing we had was fruits, vegetables, things that came off the land. So I've always been very close to nature. And so what I would tell myself or whatever is to stay the course, because just stay close to nature, because what you see in nature, you see health. And when you disconnect from nature or you remove yourself from the natural world or get too far removed from the natural world, that's when health problems and show up and the like. But basically, just like David said one time, eat good, healthy, raw food and stay grounded. Back then, we were always barefoot. We couldn't afford to wear leather shoes every day, all day long, because they were expensive and you could ruin them if it got wet. That changed in 1959, 60, of course. But anyhow, just stay close to nature. If you want to know anything, your answer is right in front of you. Just sit on a rock and watch nature. And the truth therein is the truth of health.
Thank you. Okay, so regarding the subject of, I'm sorry. So go ahead, Dr. Gold. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. So what I would say is that health was the result of healthful living. So the focus is on healthful living, and healthful living involves diet, sleep, and exercise. As far as diet, I tell myself to adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet. Exercise helps build strength, flexibility, endurance, and balance. And so, you can do whatever you like to do, but a variety of stuff is probably better than just doing one thing. And sleep's one of the most important activities we do. And so you want to go to and sleep in a cool, dark, and quiet place, get to bed early enough that you can wake spontaneously feeling refreshed. And that if you're involved in a situation where you want to do additional promotion, fasting is a useful thing. I'd suggest to fast every day for 16 hours, limit your feeding to an 8-hour window of whole natural foods, and occasionally do a longer fast if the circumstances support that.
Thank you. Regarding fasting, where are we? In other words, what you just said, Dale Bredesen on Friday night talked about Alzheimer's. And one of the things he recommended is to not eat for 3 or 4 hours before you go to sleep, and then wait 12 to 16 hours before eating again for breakfast. So in other words, have dinner at 6 o'clock, finish at 6:30, and then maybe not eat again until 10 a.m. the next morning. So aside from not eating before bed and then waiting, let's say 12 to 16 hours or 16 hours before you eat the next day, and doing that on a daily basis, what do you think is the best fasting protocol? Should we do daily, any type of fasting at home? Should we only do it at a center? Should we, what would you say is the best practices in fasting, aside from the waiting a few hours before sleep, eating before sleep, and then, or not eating a few hours before sleep, then waiting 16 hours till the next day? Aside from that, at this point, what do you recommend for people that want to get the most disease prevention benefit? What do you believe would be the ultimate fasting protocol? Would it be juice fasting, water fasting? Would it be once a year? Would it be every few years? Would it be only at a center? Would it be at home? I'd like to hear the best fasting protocol advice that anyone would like to offer.
Okay, I'll jump in first. This is David Wolfe here. I would say this, it's very much dependent now on the toxicity of the person and what the person's background is. So if a person just suddenly, like, they snap out of the toxic food and potato chips and the other things that are going on and the glyphosate, they've really got to do some steady detoxification practices before they go full on into a home fast, right? Because what you're saying is like, what can we do at home? If you're under a supervised fast, then you can have someone look over you. But if you're going to do it by yourself, you've got to start weaning yourself off those foods, going organic, going onto juices, getting onto more of a liquid diet, getting your bowels working properly, detoxify your body, sweating, getting upside down, doing yoga, all those things. And that's so different for every person. There's people who've gone their whole life, never done anything. I just had a friend of mine just did his first 3-day water fast. He's 54. Never had touched that. Now, he'd been organic for 20 years, 22 years actually, but he'd never done a water fast. So it's very much dependent on your history and what your body's ready for. One of the things I would say, if you're just going to get into intermittent fasting or fasting, is you just go easy on your body. Don't get too crazy. Suddenly, I've got to do a 21-day water fast at home tomorrow. Now that I've figured out that this is a good thing, very dangerous. It's too much too quick. Go slowly is holy.
Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I've always found, and I get to see a lot of patients on a regular basis, and that I did 25 years of research on the oral microbiome, and we're actually doing a 50-patient double-blind clinical research study right now, and you see so much candida problems, candida infections, and you see a lot of microbiome imbalances. We're made, essentially we're made of microbes. We have 10 times the number of bacteria that outnumber our bacteria and microorganisms, outnumber our own human cells. And these bacteria do everything from determine our body shape and color of our eyes and who we're going to marry, because they make pheromones, which determines, which sexual attraction. And sometimes these bacteria make a mistake. That's another story. But I think when we fast, we have to understand that there's a couple of things that need to be, and I'm so glad that David Wolfe pointed out the importance of it's not one size fits all. And there are people that have problems with elimination and opening downstream pathways for elimination. So you really want to, if you're not supervised, to at least have coaching of some sort when you fast. As far as, I do agree with Dr. Goldhamer about intermittent fasting. I think that's very, very positive way of going for not, and what Dale Bruderson recommended as well. But for myself and for what I would recommend to patients, I think it's really important to evaluate and see where you are in terms of the health spectrum before determining what type of fasting might be best.
Thank you.
So, fasting is a very powerful intervention. The intermittent fasting we're talking about, where people fast for 12 to 16 hours a day, can be done by almost everybody. Doesn't require modification of medications. It doesn't require medical supervision. It's a safe process for most people. When we talk about longer term fasting, there's a requirement, as David Wolfe pointed out, because of the biological individuality. You want to have a history exam and basic laboratory monitoring, because you want to have a baseline, not just to determine who's a good candidate or a poor candidate for fasting, but also to provide you a basis for evaluating whether the crises you're seeing in fasting are positive healing crises or deteriorative problems. They look the same sometimes to people. And the way you can differentiate is by knowing the history, monitoring the patient, determining what the trend of the acute response is, and having laboratory data to ensure that you don't get into a problem. I'm in a situation where I have hundreds of calls a month because I do the screening for True North Health Center and for a number of other clinics. And so I hear the patients that have been successful or unsuccessful at attempting remote fasting. If you fast in a facility or you fast on your own, you still need to have the benefit of history, exam, lab, and monitoring. You still need to rest. When people are too active with fasting, what happens is they force gluconeogenesis and the breakdown of protein. In a resting state, fasting primarily burns fat, and particularly visceral fat. But when you're overly active and you force increased glucose use, the only place the body can get that in the fasting state is the breakdown of protein. And so what you're trying to do is detoxify yourself, not deplete yourself. And so it's not just supervision that's important. It's also resting, being in an environment of rest, maintaining hydration. Dehydration, probably the most significant problem that can happen to people, particularly when they're too active in fasting. And in general, I mean, the truth is today, the single biggest thing medical intervention does to save lives is probably just hydrating people in the emergency room with IV fluids. People get dehydrated, and by maintaining hydration adequately, the body is able to overcome infections and other problems. What killed most people in the world of our ancient ancestors was dehydration. They died before the body was able to overcome whatever their salt was, because they didn't maintain hydration. The same vulnerability happens with fasting, and particularly in the very young and the very old, and in particular for people on pharmaceutical medications. You don't water fast on medications, and you can't just arbitrarily discontinue all medications without potential serious issues. So some of the guidance is getting people to help you appropriately withdraw medications and being clinically stable enough to fast. The problem is most doctors have very little experience getting people off drugs, because they don't take people off drugs, because they believe that people need to be on drugs for the rest of their life. If you have hypertension, they'll promise you that you'll be on drugs the rest of your life, or diabetes, or autoimmune diseases, because getting well is not part of the paradigm of conventional medicine today. It's about disease management, manipulating symptoms using very powerful pharmaceutical intervention. And we all know that once people adopt a health promoting diet, you have to be prepared to modify medications, because too much or too little creates serious complications. And so that's where it's useful for people to get guidance from people that have some experience with people actually getting well, and that may not be their standard family physician.
Thank you.
I would like to say, like, from a different perspective, we look at, because I always hear this term detoxification thrown around all the time. But classically, I look at fasting as an intervention. Now, it also could be a practice, like normally, like Dr. Goldhamer is saying, like that. That's totally fine, and I agree with that. I agree with all the benefits, and we see that all the time. We see patients going and having success with that. But it's more, But when we're looking at like a medical fast or something that's being supervised, it's a true intervention. It's actually like it's a treatment. But when I hear this term throwing around like detoxification, and everybody wants to be like, I just do some kind of cleanse or some kind of product or something like that. From an Ayurvedic perspective, which is about 4,000 years old, we look at, there's something called panchakarma. And so that the whole word detoxification actually comes from that. The problem is that it's not until like, the 60s where we started getting these ideas that are more westernized. It's like, well, I got to do a cleanse, or I got to flush something out, or I got to do something to kind of get rid of the toxins. But it's actually a medical practice, and there's a science, and it's not just a bowel regimen or a not eating regimen. And so that for true detoxification, it's actually a little bit more complicated, because you're talking about different layers of detoxification from mind all the way through the body. So that's one thing that we do at Sanjevani very specifically. But yes, I think I agree with Dr. Goldhamer that there should be more medical supervision if someone's going to do more of an intense kind of practice, or if they're on multiple medications. Because a lot of people, I think, they watch too much social media and they just jump in, or they hear some celebrity and they just jump into something, and it really becomes a counterproductive benefit for what they're trying to do, or what we're trying to give them. And what they should receive. Because when it's done appropriately, anything that's done appropriately, they usually get a benefit. But the problem is everybody wants to kind of treat themselves somewhat. Now, once you get into that daily practice, like once people understand how to fast and all, then that's great. But what I look at it is that that's still an intervention, right? Like when we look at like who are living the longest, if I look at, the 5 blue zones, or I look at people, in other cultures who live past 100 centurions, that can be part of a regimen, but that doesn't mean that you have to do that to actually get healthy. Because remember, the epigenetics, we're just using these kind of techniques to kind of get you there faster, quicker, or we haven't done anything. Like David was saying, we haven't done, this person hasn't done anything for 25 years, so therefore we must do something. But I always look at it as like, if you get the epigenetics right, then you don't have to maybe go to an extreme or have to have that intensive intervention. It's going to become a daily practice as it is. And then if you need to have extra support, or you need to get further benefits, then going for a supervised or medical fast is appropriate.
And if people make the diet and lifestyle changes, they adopt the diet, they do the exercise, they do the sleep, they get well. Most people recover.
Right.
Some people, despite their best efforts, have roadblocks, and that's where getting specialized support can be helpful. and
Sure.
overcoming. And some of the problems that people have is just their ability to adhere to the diet they know they want to do, but they're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain that comes from the chemicals that have been added to their food. And so it's hard for them to make the change to a whole plant food diet. Sometimes that's an example where a contained fast can allow taste neuroadaptation, and now all of a sudden good foods taste good and they're able to go along with the program that they've been trying to implement.
Right. And even when we do a panchakarma, for example, we don't have to even restrict food and we can get the same benefits. So there's different approaches to the same concept. It's just that the fasting is more of this really westernized. I just have to keep bringing that up because a lot of things about health right now is coming from a Western concept. And I always want to kind of always explain to the audience that, you know, things weren't just made in America at the end of the day, and especially since the 60s. Okay. And especially right now, since social media has come out, you know, it's, you know, it wasn't invented in Hollywood, by the way. So we have to really like to look towards, you know, the wisdom of ancient practices, and fasting is one of them, by the way. And in most cultures, actually, you know, Alan probably knows more history about fasting than anybody here. But I just always want to bring that cultural perspective, because sometimes, again, when it's presented, not here, but when we see it, like when I see things online or my patients will bring something, it is more like something that someone just made up and then posted on TikTok, and then everybody trying to follow that. And that's also minimizing to a 15-second idea truly what it's really a longer discussion. And I mean, Alan probably gives a whole, a whole week discussion on that, obviously, with, studies and whatnot. So, but I always like to bring that up because it's important for people to understand that all these things are not just like, oh, I just go to the gym and just do something, or I just do something, they use it like this willy-nilly thing. And for me, it's like, no, these are things that you have to understand, you have to respect. There's protocols, and it doesn't mean you have to be perfect or, have to be like, super religious about it. But the idea is that there is ways to do it where you actually get full benefit. And there's also ways to do it where you actually may potentially get harm or not get the benefit and then say, well, none of this is going to work. So then they throw up their hands and they go back to their regular lifestyle.
That's so true. I just want to confirm what Dr. It's Pai, right?
Pai, yeah.
And Dr. Goldhamer said, the fad thing is, it drives me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I see patients, and I have patients who have come in, they're on 5 days of a fast, they're totally dehydrated. They have no saliva in their mouth. They're getting gum line cavities, decay along the gum line, because they're not hydrating, as Dr. Goldhamer said. They heard about this on a TikTok, and like you said, and the reality is that they could be doing way more harm than good.
Mm-hmm.
And so really, this is not a one size fits all, and it definitely needs a certain education. But we live in a culture where we want the quick fix. We want I'm going to do this fast, and then I'm going to be really healthy. I'm all cleaned out, and then I could go binge again. It's like, and they're drinking every night, alcohol consumption, ridiculous, and all this stuff. But then they'll fast for 5 days and think they're all better.
Right.
And I think everybody's illustrated that very, very well. And it's great to hear other doctors share the same frustration. So I think that was a terrific question.
Thank you. Clinton, we have to decide how to spend our time. There's lots of different things we could do. Grounding certainly sounds safer than anything else I could imagine. But the question that a lot of us want to know is, how much benefit is there? We assume we believe there is benefit to it, and we like the idea. But to make the commitment to really every day take a 2-hour walk barefoot on the sand or the soil, is this a big deal? Is this, like, in other words, there are hyperbaric oxygen chambers that cost more than $15,000. And my mind suddenly thinks, wow, maybe that's really does something great because it's this cool new technology, where what you're saying is just walking on wet soil. And I'm thinking, somehow, is this really something that powerful, or is it just nice and, help, a little good?
Well, I've spent 25 years supporting the research, developing a handful of products, producing a book. It's now sold over 1 million copies. Have one movie that's had 60 million views, one that's only had 4 million views so far. And what I've been doing primarily is putting most of my energy in getting the studies done to help people understand what it is, and then to develop a handful of products for the people who can't go outdoors or can't get back to nature and so on. But anyhow, so everything is an educational movement, but here's the significance of it. It's like when you put your bare feet on the earth, or that you're electrically connected to the earth with a pad or anything else, then you're going to equalize electrically with the earth. The earth is negative about 20 to 50 millivolts. So what that means is you have an abundance of free electrons that are able to move quickly and rapidly reduce charge. That's why we ground everything in the electrical and the communications industry, is to prevent charge, to prevent lightning from getting into a home, or to prevent static electricity from creating noise and interference on lines, and it goes on and on. But anyhow, so what we learned, I mean, the issue was this, and it took a long time to figure this all out, because in the beginning I thought it was, EMF and all that kind of stuff, but then later we realized that it's really grounding alone. It's really the negative charge of the earth on the body that is the mechanism of action. So the first thing that happens, and we have studies on all of this, the first thing that happens is when you put your bare feet on the earth, you're going to stay there 15, 20 minutes, your blood viscosity normalizes. What that means is the little red blood cells, they all have a surface charge, an electrical surface charge, and it's negative. But so when you stand on the earth, the negative surface charge on the red blood cells equalizes with the earth. The significance of that is, in the subjects that we've measured, was before the blood is all thick and sticky, you have a lot of rouleau formation, you just have a lot of fibrogen, everything in it. An hour later, the blood is all separated, nice, and it's like Dr. Sinatra said, blood's like thin like red wine rather than thick like ketchup. And so anyhow, how that happens is when you stand barefoot on the earth, the red blood cells become more negatively charged, about 300% increase in the free electrons that are on the surface of the red blood cells. So them being more negative, it's like little negative magnets, metaphorically. And when you push them together, they push each other apart. So the red blood cells being round with a negative charge, they're going to repel each other. That thins the blood, normalizes the blood viscosity, and then the blood can get in and out of the capillaries and more properly oxygenate the tissue. And so anyhow, this is our most natural state as a human being, because throughout all time we lived on the earth, our bodies were always negatively charged. And we didn't, until about 1960s when it really took place, is we started wearing rubber sole shoes. And then that's when we invented plastics. And we started creating the synthetic materials for the shoes. And then we carpeted all of our homes and we plasticized everything. Even our steering wheels are now plasticized. But anyhow, so we lost that negative charge exponentially. From 1960 to 1920 or 2020, today we have 95% of all people wearing synthetic sole insulated shoes. Back in 1960, it was 90% of the people who were wearing leather sole shoes are going barefoot. So anyhow, there's been a dramatic change, but in this same 60 years, we're talking about that we started wearing synthetic sole shoes. You've seen the rise in autism, diabetes, and cancer. All of these inflammation-related health disorders all have been growing exponentially for the last 60 years. To put it in perspective, 60 years ago, a visit to a practitioner was, probably 90% was, infectious disease, childbirth, and acute injury. Today, 99% of all visits to a general practitioner is for an inflammation-related health disorder. So anyhow, the focus of what I did with grounding was to lay down the facts. If there's a reason, and it comes to me naturally because I spent 30 years in the communications industry. You ground everything electrical to maintain internal electrical stability of the functioning of the equipment. Well, the human body is the most electrical thing on the planet. Every cell is electrical. Every transaction in the body is electrical. And if you have a shortage of electrons, you got a problem. But here's the real bottom line of it. Most people, inflammation is Well, it's from this and that, or 100 different reasons that cause inflammation in the body. And I think they're all correct to a degree. But the problem is the reason inflammation manifests and takes hold in the body is because the immune system is compromised. And so if you have a pathogen in the body, you're going to have a neutrophil. I mean, if the immune system recognizes a neutrophil is going to swim over, encapsulate it, and it's going to release reactive oxygen species. Reactive means it's electrically charged and it has enough voltage to strip electrons from a pathogen. And that's how the immune system destroys pathogens and damage cells. So if you do not have enough redox potential or enough free electrons in the body, then some of those excess radicals will, if they're not neutralized in nanoseconds, they're going to reach over and steal an electron from a healthy cell and damage it. Another message goes back to the immune system. The immune system sends another neutrophil or white blood cell to clean it up. And the same thing happens over and over again. And so this is how chronic inflammation manifests. So the problem isn't all of the things that cause inflammation. The problem is we're no longer naturally grounded. So our immune system is dysfunctioning. It's now busy fighting the fire of inflammation that it itself is creating because it's fighting the excess radicals that would have normally been naturally grounded if the body were grounded. And so then when we're, when we have all of these, radicals or whatever, the air, the whatever that we do that affects the body, food-wise or mental, all these things. If your immune system were working properly, your body could handle most of it. But the fact that it is not grounded, the immune system is getting more compromised, and then all of a sudden, health disorder manifests, and you end up with this disease or that disease or whatever. When there's really one problem, it's all about the immune system. No matter what anybody says, there's only one healer, one thing that can heal the body, and that's the immune system. You can do things to help it and support it. And that's what you're all talking about here. And it's really important, all of it. But it's really, the focus needs to be on the immune system. And the number one reason the immune system is compromised today is grounding. We've put this down in studies. It's not something that's going to get to the world. It's going to take 40 years. It took 60 years for us to get in this mess. It's going to take another 40 years. You've got to ground the shoes. You have to ground everything in your living environment. You have to value add. I mean, you have to add something that's conductive to your seating, your flooring, your shoes, your bedding, wherever you walk, sleep, or sit. Because being grounded is part of your immune system. What maintains the immune system electrically stable. It is very important. Otherwise, I wouldn't have spent the last 25 years, maybe 20 million of my money, doing this, because it's that important.
Thank you.
David and a few others have worked with me over the years, and everybody's kind of helped and brought it along. And we have a few million people grounded. We have sold millions of products. China has sold tens and tens of millions of products, earthing products, via Amazon and so on. So we're the small player, but we still are doing the research and trying to educate the world and get the message out there. It's really important, especially for the younger next generation.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sorry about running long.
Okay. Next question, I guess, is when it comes to nutritional supplements, it's just it's not as intuitive for a lot of us as food, and we really would like to know, again, where are we now based on all your research? What is the non-negotiable supplements that we all need to be taking? What's right behind that? And what is the list of supplements that you would, without knowing our history, would recommend we do or don't take? You can all answer that.
Okay, cool. I'm going to jump in first on that one. One of my favorite supplements of all time, a big discovery, huge discovery, kind of late in the game. I kind of made this discovery in 2015, is activated charcoal on the regular regularly taking activated charcoal 5 times a week, 500 milligrams. You could do more. I do sometimes 2,000 milligrams, 2,500 milligrams a day. And it's the ultimate detoxifier. It's the safest, most well-tested, and the most likely to improve your lifespan. If all of these things that we're saying about detoxification are real, namely that we're detoxifying and cleansing to try to bring certain threshold toxins down below critical levels so we don't have a straw that breaks the camel's back, charcoal is the most adsorptive and most appropriate tool in bringing those toxins down on the regular. I had some, it was like a baba ganoush, and it did not sit well with me. This is about a year ago, and I was like, I was in an airport and I thought I was going to throw up, and I immediately took 8 charcoal and it stopped it like that. Now that tells us something deeper, which is it acted against whatever the bacteria, the toxin, whatever was going on in that food poisoning, it acted against it immediately without any side effects. It's the most important antitoxic substance we have in a toxic world. I'm so far into charcoal from my own experience of internally taking it on the regular that all my filters, air filters, all made out of charcoal. All my water filters all have charcoal in it. This entire house is surrounded on this whole farm, this whole forest with where, because it purifies the ground, it improves the fertility of the earth, it increases negative charge. I've sprouted plants, I've done a whole greenhouses full of just charcoal, no soil, not even any soil in there. Now that's how they were sprouted. They got to a certain size, and then I brought them into the garden bed, so they didn't go their full length in charcoal, but certainly easily sprouted and grew to a good size in just charcoal alone. Charcoal also neutralizes odors. So if you have toxic odors coming out of your body, it's absolutely amazing what charcoal can do to halitosis. And halitosis is a mortal sin, just for everyone to know that. And then on top of that, all the other interesting uses, women's face masks, things like I got stung in the eye by a wasp. That was the craziest thing ever. I walked into my shed. I was on my way out to go to a friend's house. So just the car's running. I had to go get something in the shed. A wasp saw me, dive bombed me, and stung me in the eyeball. Now, that was not a very fun experience, but I immediately ran inside. I put my finger in the water of the tap, put that into an open container of charcoal. I have a whole bunch of charcoal powder in a glass container, stuck my finger in there and put that right on my eye. Within 5 minutes, I was better. Within 20 minutes, I drove away. That's how powerful it is. You can use it against mosquito bites, bee stings, all kinds of things. And it just goes on and on like that. It's one of the most appropriate supplements and tools in history. I almost could not think of anything more important than activated charcoal, or just charcoal in general, as an aid to health. The longest lived animals, in terms of long conventional research on longevity, nutraceuticals, food, supplements, what's going to cause animals to live the longest, charcoal leads that field by far. It's not even close. 20% increased lifespan, 21% increased lifespan, 23% increased lifespan, 30% increased lifespan, 33% increased lifespan, 34% increased lifespan, 40% increased lifespan, 43% increased lifespan, even when animals were started late in their life cycle on the charcoal, which is feeding into the idea that as we get later into life, the metabolic toxins and environmental toxins reach a threshold problem more quickly, more rapidly, and we cross that threshold where we break the camel's back. And so even if you start late, still good, and you could still extend life significantly according to the animal research. Now, let's just say for all foods and supplements, nutraceuticals, we're looking at a 9 to 18% increase in lifespan, which is phenomenal and great. But we're getting even more than that with activated charcoal. That was such a shocking discovery. I've been absolutely enamored with that research. It's a life-changing research. Now, it doesn't just work in you. I want to end with this little piece. As the charcoal moves through you, it still continues to work as it goes out of your body and into the sewers in your local neighborhood and your septic system. And eventually I started realizing this old house, 1960, not this house, but my farmhouse, it actually had a smell that came up from the septic, and I started flushing charcoal down that toilet, and that just ended that. That was the end of that. Clean the whole septic system out. I do believe that cleanliness is near to godliness. I take that as a literal fact. And there's been nothing I've ever come across that makes you feel as clean as charcoal. Can you do charcoal soap? You absolutely can. Can you gargle with charcoal? Sure you can. There's so many amazing things you can do with charcoal, and that's my number one supplement. I always have it near, so I'll show you my charcoal right here. Boom, always there. And there's the charcoal, right? And this is a Puluan capsule. This is really a special type of capsule. I can't get it now. This is the last of it, the tapioca starch capsule. Due to the supply chain problems, it's impossible to get, but hopefully we'll get it back. Anyway, that's my take on the best supplement ever.
David, just one quick thing. The word charcoal sounds weird. When I was young, we'd have barbecues and my dad would take a bag and throw charcoal and we'd light it on fire. Is that what you're referring to, or is it different than that?
Great. I'm glad you asked that, because charcoal briquettes that are treated with potassium nitrate and numerous other chemicals are not anything we want to be eating. So, if you had charcoal briquettes and you hosed them down with kerosene and then lit that up with your dad when you're a kid, that's not what we're talking about here. You can take, basically what charcoal is a baked wood. So let's say, for example, we had a steel case in the middle of a fire that had just a little hole in it so the gases could escape, and you threw that thing with a big log in it, you threw that into a fire and you baked that wood, it would eventually charcoal. Typically in a fire, you're going to see at a certain circumference around the fire, that's where the charcoal will accumulate. The middle wood, the wood that's closest to the heat and the strongest heat, will calcine. It will actually disintegrate and it will turn into a powder, a fine white powder. We're talking about those pieces and chunks of actually skeletonized wood that's surrounding that. Typically hardwoods is what's been used historically, and hard shells of walnut, shells of coconut, shells of willow, shells of willow wood, and wood of birch, which are hardwoods. And so edible hardwood trees are typically what's been selected in Europe. But when you get further south, you start getting into things like an abundance of coconut. So that coconut shell became the selected material for charcoal making.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I just have one thing I have to say. I use charcoal every day. I use it with patients when we remove heavy metals such as dental amalgam, which is 52% mercury. It is a very powerful binder. Any indigestion, and David, you have the best charcoal. You really do. It's really, really fine, and it's great. Now I want to talk about toothpaste, because there is a fad of people using charcoal toothpaste thinking, well, it's a powerful binder, let me brush my teeth with it. And it is abrasive to enamel. Charcoal as an element is very, very abrasive, and it can strip the microbiome. You have bad breath, halitosis. It's an imbalance in this microbial flora called the oral microbiome. So I did a lot of looking into that. You have an overgrowth of sulfur-causing bacteria, which, by the way, charcoal can get rid of that odor. But charcoal is not going to rebalance the microbiome. It's just going to take those odor-causing bacteria away. And if you use it, like I said, too much of a good thing is not a good thing anymore. So what I worked on for years and years, and David knows this as well, is that I developed a product, one of the two top nutritionals that were super important for the mouth and for the body. They found out, scurvy on ships in the days when they came over on sailing ships from Europe, and sailors would get scurvy. What were they deficient in? They were deficient in vitamin C. So I have this optimal C, it's a liposomal C. But more importantly than that, toothpaste was invented by soap makers 100 years ago, 150 years ago. It was flavored detergent for your mouth, and then we put bug killers in the 1970s because, from the germ theory, we saw, bacteria that cause tooth decay and gum disease. You got to kill them, kill them, kill them. So everything was kill, 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 and we put pesticides in toothpaste. And then, we have natural pesticides like tea tree oil and clove oil and peppermint oil and all this stuff. And, and then the most notorious ingredient in toothpaste was fluoride. And we could talk about fluoride. I don't really want to take too much time with that now, but fluoride is a disaster. It is an utter disaster. It's a toxic halide element, fluorine, that's the most highly charged non-radioactive element in the periodic table. And when you introduce it into the human body, which, gets powerfully reacts with teeth and bones. That's what we thought was a good thing, by the way, the late 1940s. We thought fluorine, which we came up with the word fluoride, and it's the most powerfully charged, negatively charged element in periodic table. It converts your teeth and bones from hydroxyapatite, which has some flexibility, and it makes it into this hard material like this glass table here. And it has 30% less strength, converts it to fluorapatite. And it is so bad, it lowers IQ in children. Over 50 studies, drinking fluoridated water lowers IQ, does nothing to reduce cavities. That is a complete junk science. And it's 75 years old of junk science with fluorine. So
You're muted. Okay, you're back.
thank you very much. The one thing I tried to do is, in the 1980s, they made fluoride toothpaste taste like bubble gum and put sparkles in it. And it was fluorescent blue. It's called Crest Sparkle. Fluoride fatalities in children went up 280%. It took the FDA 10 years to put a poison warning on toothpaste. So my dietary supplement, David, we were talking about this before, is Revitin. So if you put more than this amount on your toothbrush of conventional toothpaste, you have to call poison control right away. So I made toothpaste that kids can eat and parents can eat. By the way, 14 days, you get a 78% reduction in inflammation. And it's called Revitin. Revitin is the product, REVITIN.com. But I did this because I knew we had to change what people are sticking in their mouths. So my dietary supplement is Revitin. And by the way, it's loaded with vitamin C and CoQ10. And it's also has vitamin D3 and K2. D3, lots of studies on D and K. Nobody's brought it up yet, but it's the new hot vitamin next to vitamin C and charcoal. So who's next? Keep it going.
Go ahead, Alan.
Well, in a natural setting, you wouldn't need too much in the way of supplements, but people on a vegan diet today are not supplementing their diet with the feces associated with animal products. And since B12 only comes from bacteria, it is true that vegans will eventually develop B12 deficiency if they go long enough. So I recommend that people do supplement B12. If their D levels are too low, then they should get out in the sun and get their D levels up. If they can't get out in the sun, if they live in an area that's not hot enough to bring their D levels up, then they may want to supplement that. But let's be clear, people are sick in our culture because of dietary excess, not deficiency. And you cannot treat dietary excess with pills and potions and powders. The only way you can get rid of dietary excess consequences is to get rid of dietary excess with a health promoting whole plant food, SOS-free diet, get exercise, get sleep. And that's also where fasting can be helpful. If there is excess consequences, sometimes you can give the body a chance to speed up the process of getting rid of the excess. Also, many supplements cause a lot more harm than good. For example, most studies on cancer where they tried to supplement, for example, vitamin A, the death rate was higher in the supplemented groups than the non-supplemented groups. So we need to be careful that anytime you do concentrated, isolated nutritional supplementation, you want to make sure you're doing more good than harm. The other point I'd make is that however effective charcoal is, it's going to be effective at mitigating the materials in the intestinal tract, not necessarily intracellular toxins. That, it's not going to reach through the intestinal tract necessarily and pull the materials out of the cells, where it's then processed by the kidneys and eliminated primarily in the urine. So that's where, good diet and lifestyle habits over a long period of time, perhaps facilitated with fasting, can be helpful at mobilizing those intermediary products of metabolism and those toxic products that are building up inside the cells of humans.
Alan, what do you think of high dose vitamin C?
Well, I think that vitamin C
yeah.
is an essential nutrient. You mentioned that sailors used to get scurvy, and then they figured out if they would take limes with them and suck on the lime. They didn't know what was in the lime, but they knew that would prevent the scurvy. That's why they used to call them limeys. And they adopted that name. So the point is, yes, you have to get all of these nutrients that we're discussing, but the best way to get nutrients is from a whole plant food SOS-free diet. Because remember, if you read Dr. Campbell's book, which is fascinating, called Whole, he talks about that the impact of individual nutrients can be profoundly different, whether it's coming from a whole food versus in an isolated supplement, that the impact, the effect size can be dramatically more effective, manyfold. And so the best way is a whole plant food diet, a diverse amount of fruits and vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And then to the degree that we're forced into it by circumstance, therapeutically or otherwise, we use isolated supplementation. And the only supplement we routinely recommend for people not being contaminated with the bacteria from feces is vitamin B12.
Thank you.
I'll have to agree with Alan on that. Exactly. So I want him to go first because he's going to basically say what I was going to say. And the thing is this, like what we do in our clinic is that we test for these things, because at the end of the day, you should be getting as much as you can from your diet. So, I mean, do we have products that we make? Do we have clinical trials? Yes. Do we have patents on products? Yes. People can read my book and understand, like, these are the things that you can take, and listen to my upcoming lecture on inflammation tomorrow, and I'll go into some detail on that. But when we want to look at it from my perspective, is like everybody's microbiome is different. Everybody's nutritional levels of what we eat, and even the soil of where that food is grown or how that food is grown is going to change your nutrient levels. So we actually measure this thing. So we like to look at exactly what is someone deficient in. How is their microbiome, functioning or not functioning? What are the foods that might be even triggering inflammatory responses like sensitivities, so that we can guide people, because we want to be eating a whole food plant-based diet. Absolutely. We want to be eating as much organic as possible, etc. However, most of us, if we ate all at the same table, we had all the same foods, all some same supplements, how our body absorbs, assimilates, and excretes is completely unique to all of us. And so that can be related to just not only to the diet, but even to some genetics and even epigenetics and metabolomics and all sorts of other aspects. But what we want to do is we measure that, because then what we do is we can then tell our patients, this is what you're deficient in. This is what you need to eat more of that has those nutrients in. Your food is medicine. Supplements only supplement the diet. They don't replace it. And even when we give the supplements, then we want to look at potency, purity, safety, efficacy. And then is there clinical studies? Can we show that it's actually going to do something more beneficial rather than causing harm? There is a lot of bad products on the market. There's a lot of bad products online. So understandingly why we want to push more food, because we're trying to get it from that direction. But what we like to look at is that then, instead of people buying tons and tons of products, what we like to look at is investigate what's individually needed for each person, try to encourage that food that they can get that source from. And then supplements only come in as we're supplementing the diet if they can't get enough of it, or we need a targeted response. They have a certain specific condition where this has been shown to be helpful, then we would give that. And that's how our approach is. Yes, vitamin D, obviously we should, if we're already talking about this so late in the day, then it's like people should already know that they should be testing their vitamin D, making sure their vitamin D levels are optimum. But even going to Alan's discussion on B12, when we test everybody, believe it or not, more people are having B12 deficiencies that are also not plant-based or vegan. And why? It's because 99% of food products that are coming from animal sources is factory farmed. So when we test them, they're also B12 deficient, believe it or not, because the animals that they're eating is also deficient, right? Because they're not getting their natural vegetarian or vegan diet. So we like to look at everybody, because a lot of times we'll pit people saying, well, hey, you're plant-based, you only need this. I'm like, I look at everybody like everybody's having nutritional deficiencies because no one's eating an optimal diet, even when they think, because even their microbiome might be off. And by doing that, then people save thousands and thousands of dollars rather than just running through and saying, well, this is the trend of this month, this is the trend of that month. We go directly to the source, we go directly to the individuality, and we treat that individual as a person rather than like, okay, well, I just saw this on social media. I saw this on the conference. I saw this on tomorrow's conference, something else they'll see. And they keep buying all these things. And it's like a heavily marketed thing if everybody wants to have the right product. But are they doing the basic essential thing? We like to actually individually analyze that and then give the recommendations because they have the better outcomes from that.
Right now, microbiome itself is kind of a new and interesting field. It's complicated. General consensus, I think, would be that the diversity in the microbiome is thought to be important to immunity, whether it's from cancer, heart disease, or COVID-19 infection. And that what you feed your microbiome, the prebiotics, the diet, determines both what kind of bacteria you grow, the diversity, and also what they're pooing inside your intestinal tract. When you think about it, you have 5 pounds of bacteria, which is a trillion creatures, living, swimming in your intestinal tract right now and defecating inside you. And what they poo could be TMA, which becomes trimethylamine oxidase and is thought to be a problem. It could be vitamin K, which you need. It's an essential nutrient. So whether you get toxic waste or fertilizer depends on what you shove in your mouth and what ultimately is the food for the microbiodiversity. We've done a study, actually, the first study, I believe, on long-term fasting effect on microbiome. We did it with Luigi Fontana from Washington University. The data is just coming out now. It's been a few years, but it's such a complicated mess trying to unwind it. But what we believe we're going to find is that fasting and a healthy diet promote a broad, diverse host of organisms. Unlike what you see, for example, in people on dominantly based meat diets, they have different bacteria, different productions of various toxic levels. Plant-based eaters have a broader diversity and thought to be a more health promoting preventative microbiome.
Yeah, you know, Alan, I'm so glad you brought that up because the reality is that, you know, what I found in the research that we did in the mouth, that it was all about microbial homeostasis.
Right.
That the same bacteria that I learned in dental school cause tooth decay or gum disease in a balanced oral ecology, right? Which you were talking about fasting and diet, so essential for promoting that microbial homeostasis. What we found in the mouth was absolutely incredible. The same bacteria that cause tooth decay and gum disease are benign and beneficial in that balanced ecology. And they did amazing things. These bacteria transport ionic minerals from saliva to remineralize your teeth. You don't need fluoride, by the way. What you need is a balanced microbiome, that they transport molecular oxygen and they take ROS and reactive oxidative species and other waste products away. So this microbiome are the housekeepers. What we found, they're the housekeepers in the mouth. And the other thing I wanted to say is you mentioned prebiotics versus probiotics. And that's what we found is that we really need, probiotics were tried in the mouth in the 1970s. Probiotics do not work in the mouth. There were some products that came out, probiotics for the mouth and all this, yes. It's garbage, it doesn't work. What you really need to do is nourish and support the indigenous microflora of the mouth and the gut and the skin, your hair, your genital urinary tract. We have this microbiome that's as unique as our DNA. So we have similarities, but many differences. So the approach that I found to be the most effective in terms of oral health and ancient Ayurveda, as Dr. Pai knows, says you cannot have a clean body without a clean mouth. And that is by making peace with our microbes. So my mantra is make peace with your microbes, and prebiotics are the most effective way. And that's why I did this. I spent 20 years on a prebiotic formulation to make peace with the microbes in the mouth and not kill.
So I saw some data that was interesting. They said if you divided a human being into 2 piles, cells that are human and cells that are non-human. So it turns out there's more non-human cells in a human being than human cells. So we have to make peace with our environment, whether it's the mouth or the gut, on the skin. And that may turn out ultimately not just be a marker of health, but one of the most important variables that control our health.
Yes.
Okay. what I'm going to do now is if you could write this down or type it on your computer, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of questions and then you answer whichever one you want to answer. Okay. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch of questions, 16 of them, and then you answer which ones you feel you're drawn to answer. Okay. So here we go. Question number 1. Is it more powerful to ground in water? Like if we could go in an ocean or a lake, is that better than just walking on the dirt? Do I get extra benefit if I go into the ocean or into a bay or something? Question number 2, is there anything we could do to improve our memory? Number 3, what is our basic dental protocol? What are the basics of brushing, flossing, x-rays, teeth? What is the protocol that everyone who wants to avoid dental problems will have? Number 4, is a far-red infrared sauna recommended and necessary part of our daily regime? Are we trying to do this every day? Is this a goal? Number 5, am I supposed to be drinking 6 glasses of water a day, or is that just something that my mom says to do? I mean, is this something that is really actually a good protocol? Number 6, what type of water do we drink? For people that don't have the mindset to go and find their own water sources, what do what do we recommend? We live in the age of Amazon. People are at home. They like to order things. What do you do for water? What's the best thing? Number 7, are there any recommendations on water filters? Is there any specific type, a distiller? Is there anything you recommend with water filters? Number 8, are colonics supposed to be part of our life? A lot of us hope you say no. We're not really anxious to do colonics, but is this something that you consider a necessary part? Number 9, is iodine something important? I know a woman who insists this is the most critical and crucial thing, and she sells an iodine, and she absolutely constantly tells me that we need iodine to fill the receptor before something else does that's bad. So iodine. Number 10, are we supposed to be taking probiotics every day? Number 11, Dr. Goldhamer says no salt. Is this, other people I've heard in the past said no salt's okay. What is the thinking about salt? Number 12, where are we on sunlight? Am I trying every day to get as much sunlight as I can? Am I trying only to do it with a hat? Where do we stand with sunlight? Number 13, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be thinking about my thyroid every now and then. Most of the time I forget about it. And then every now and then someone says something and I think, is there something I'm supposed to be doing to take better care of my thyroid? Number 14, Brian Clement from the Hippocrates Health Institute says that, and Gabriel Cousins, but especially Brian, have said that fruit feeds yeast, mold, fungus, sugar, and candida. And they said that Thomas Seyfried from Boston College confirms this. And a lot of us who have followed Brian and his sprouting have been very uncomfortable eating fruit for this reason, because we think it feeds yeast, mold, fungus, candida, and cancers. And number 15, is there a special protocol or recommendation on getting rid of the heavy metals and toxins? Should we be taking a certain type of bath? Is there certain type of herbs or supplements we should put in the bath? Or are we supposed to be, is there a way to deal with these heavy metals and to get all this stuff that's in the environment out of our bodies? So please answer any of these that you'd like to answer in any order that you're comfortable with. We'd like to get an answer to all 15 of these questions.
Since you did the dental one first, I think you did basic dental protocol.
Yep.
Was that the first one?
Any order you want, but go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I'll jump in on that just to get that out of the way. I saw in the chat, somebody even repeated what I said, make peace with your microbes. The reality is your dental protocol, I see people trying to sterilize them out. Like you have dental hygienists who are, militant about brushing and flossing and brushing, and I was on the Dr. Oz show once, and Dr. Oz said, do you have to floss, or can you use a little pick, or is it flossing or picks or this and that? It was like ridiculous. And I said, Dr. Oz, basic maintenance, like diets. Food that lays between your teeth is like the garbage between tenements in buildings in Brooklyn on a hot summer day. Eventually it starts to smell and then the rats come out. I said, that's why we need to do something called debridement. Once every 24 hours, debridement. The important thing about a dental protocol, and I have 4 things. First, go in your medicine cabinet and take out any commercial toothpaste, take out any commercial mouthwash. This whole idea of people addicted to mouthwash, it's because their microbiome's out of balance. So what you really want to do is have a very gentle cleansing approach. I don't care if you use a dry toothbrush and have a good diet. I mean, I developed a prebiotic toothpaste because over 80% of the people on this program have some stage of gum disease. That's the statistic, 80%, because everything we've been doing is wrong. And you need to reduce stress, you need to exercise regularly. This is all part of a healthy mouth. So what I want to just, one big thing that jumped out at me was about heavy metals and toxins and whether you take these baths and whatever you do to get heavy metals out. Getting heavy metals out of the body, and I know a lot about this because I work a lot with functional medicine doctors, excuse me, who refer patients to me to get the mercury out of their mouth. So you cannot get it out of your body if you still have it in your teeth, number 1. Number 2, heavy metals are not just in fillings. It's in nickel cadmium crowns that have porcelain on top called PFMs. It's in, they put lead in porcelain to make it more reflective. So you got to make sure you have porcelain that is, either lead-free, and so heavy metals is a hot topic because it's very debilitating to thyroid, by the way. Talked about thyroid dysregulation. Whenever I see people with thyroid dysregulation, I always think of heavy metals. To get mercury out of the body, and by the way, it doesn't stay in your blood, it goes right past the blood-brain barrier. It goes right into cells. Getting mercury out of the body is like peeling layers of an onion. Slow and steady, not rapid. I had a patient come into me. He had 80 IV chelations in 1 year, 80, trying to get mercury out. And all he was doing was redistributing it around the body. So I know Dr. Pai would probably be right in my corner on this, but those are the ones that jumped out at me. I don't really going to give everybody else a chance at this point.
I can talk about water. I mean, you think about the most natural water would be rainwater if the environment wasn't polluted. And that is, in fact, distilled water. That's what rainwater is distilled water. We don't have a pristine environment, so now we'll use technology to distill water, but it's the purest water. And you're drinking water for the H2O. You're not drinking water for the contaminant minerals or heavy metals or other things that might be carried along with it. You get more minerals in the fruits and vegetables you eat than you're going to have to, rather than the micro amounts, you might pick up some trace minerals in the water. So we recommend highly purified water. It doesn't have to be distilled. It could be highly purified by reverse osmosis or other types of filtration. You just don't want to drink municipal water with the hydrogenated halocarbons and the interaction with the chlorine and all the other stuff, the fluoride, and God knows what else they're putting in the public water now. So some kind of highly purified, the purest of the water is distilled water, which is why in our laboratory, when we're doing research, we use distilled water because it's the purest water. It's the same water we use, and from the same machines, by the way, that we use with our patients and that we use for cooking and the rest of it. So my advice is just use pure water. The purest of the pure is distilled water. And as far as drinking 6 or 8 or 50 glasses of water a day, you do need a significant water intake, it can either come from the plants you eat in the forms of fruits and vegetables, or if you don't get enough fruits and vegetables, you can take additional water in, hopefully pure water, in your diet. But to say that everybody needs X amount of water is ridiculous, because some people get a tremendously high water content from eating 2 pounds of salad and 3 pounds of fruit a day. And so or vice versa. And their water intake is going to be lower. If you're sweating, if you're exercising, your water intake is going to be higher. So it's going to be an individual thing. But the idea is maintaining hydration is important. And oftentimes people that are dehydrated, usually because of poor dietary choices, may get symptomatic relief by increasing their hydration.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
I'll
jump
say,
in.
I'll
go ahead, Doctor.
Now, I'll just say on the water thing, I always tell my patients, I sit down whenever I'm doing the consultation, we look up Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, look at the water database, look at what their municipal water is, and you'll see like every city is different, every place is different, what toxins and how high they are. And then also show you like what a carbon filter, like some people can just have the back of the refrigerator or like kind of Brita Pure, they can use that, or what reverse osmosis will, because some things don't get out through the carbon filter, right? So, but really it's based on what their area is and what their exposure really is, depending on how far they need to go. Because I had someone like a few weeks ago, and they were in a small town. Their water only had 4 contaminants. I was like, wow, that's the healthiest water I've seen in America, And then, like I'm in Albuquerque, we got like 30 contaminants, and there's other places that they have. I had some last week, and they had the PUFAs were off the chart. They live downstream from one of the big chemical companies that are dumping that. So yes, I mean, they're not going to test for everything, obviously, right? So there's going to be certain things that are going to be outside, but the idea is that I always want people like, don't drink from the tap. That's the first thing. But also don't buy bottled water also, right? We understand now, just last week, the study came out with microplastics being found in the blood, right? So 80% of the healthy volunteers, young patients, have microplastics now floating around in the blood. Why most of it's coming from BP, plastic bottles that we're just drinking bottled water. Everything's being in a package, or sodas, and everything is packaged. So trying to just getting a filter of any kind is going to be beneficial first and foremost. And that always comes out more cost effective than having more plastic and more other kind of contaminants. Usually it's municipal just filtering. So why don't you just get your own filter and save, it usually costs about 2 cents per gallon when you buy a filter of any kind, usually when you cost it out. And yet people are spending like $5 a bottle of water. It's insane, right? And also, I just want to make sure on the water thing, not to alkalinize water. Alkalinizing water also changes your microbiome and causes all sorts of problems. So don't fall into that magic little marketing deception of like, oh, well, you got to have, because you need to be alkaline, so we need to drink alkaline water. Don't do that, right? Nature intended water to have a normal pH, give or take, depending on where you live. But all these high alkaline waters is just a highly marketed, highly profitable product that actually causes more harm than good.
Thank you.
David, you were going to say something.
Okay, yep. I'm just getting my mute button off. Okay, so let's look at what we got here. Let's see. Memory. That one brought up an interesting thought. Rudolf Steiner's take on memory was that we're basically a plant walking upside down, so that this is the roots and this is the trunk sticking out, and here's the branches, and you can probably guess where the fruits and flowers are. And this is also interesting too, related to thyroid, because if you go out to a tree, the place of really high charge is in the stump of the tree, in the just as it's coming out of the ground. And that's kind of like right here, our thyroid, super high negative charge. Back in the old days when we were first playing around with Clint Ober's grounding material, and I'm always using it. So we would take something like this. So this is my little grounding pad right here, but we would literally take one of these little silver little bands and put it around the neck and literally plug right into the thyroid from the ground. So just right into the ground, right into here, and just see what happens. It's pretty intense, I have to say. You do that for a while. Most people can't handle it for very long because their thyroid is really suffering from a deficiency of negatively charged electricity. Now, when we get into this thing about, okay, what for memory, Rudolf Steiner said roots. So I really started going into that. I started going like, yeah, let me diversify the roots I'm eating. Astragalus and sweet potato and lotus root and burdock root and radishes and onions, and the list goes on. And we could just think, I'm growing ashwagandha in the backyard here. It just goes on and on. There's just so many roots. So I try to maintain a diversity. Another thing I'm growing over here is Hoshu Wu or Hishu Wu, another famous root in the buckwheat family. And there's just so many different types of roots. And I've found that if you eat lots of different types of roots, it really does help you to think differently. This is above and beyond the ideas of like DHA for the brain, which I'm very into. I think the long chain omega-3 fatty acid is really powerful, DHA in particular, and EPA is powerful too, and ALA is very important. So I always talk about the 3 omega-3s. And the ability of your body to use DHA to create a healthier growing baby, for example, is well shown in the literature and well known, and that postpartum depression has to do with the DHA that gets pulled out of the mother that goes into the baby. So we always want to have a surplus of DHA. One of the best sources of it is where it comes from, which is plankton in the ocean. And so people got onto that. Really was Jacques Cousteau kind of was like, let's go to the source. And he pointed out numerous edible plankton out of the ocean. There's enormous operations going on all over the world now that produce DHA as an algae oil rather than as a fish oil. There's also some DHA, a small amount, it's about 7% in AFA blue-green algae, and there's even some in spirulina. So those are sources of it as well. So those are things that have come up for me in terms of mental fitness and memory. And of course, there's the memory herbs like ginkgo and gachu kola, and those are always great as well. So I'd throw those in the mix. What else? Enemas, colonics, Kalima boards. This came up when I was doing my talk the other day. And basically, when you get into a fast, you don't want to be bathing in your own waste. So typically when people get into a fast, they clench down and they grip and they get constipated. And that's very troublesome and makes the fast much more difficult. And you're basically bathing in your own waste. So if you need an enema or a colonic or a Kalima board to get that waste out and overcome the mind, which is trying to get into a holding pattern, that's critical. I think that's a critical piece of the puzzle. So you're not bathing in your own waste and the waste is moving out. We usually do 3-week cleanses 4 times a year. And the first week, it goes longer, it really goes a month because you have to work your way back out slowly. But the first week I would get one colonic, second week another colonic, third week another colonic, so I'm emptied out. And that's about as much colonics as I do. I'm not like in the colonics every day or enemas every day. I know people who do enemas every day, coffee enemas every day, who are the most fit, unbelievable specimens you've ever seen in your life. I don't personally think that's the right thing for everybody because it's really overcoming your natural ability to eliminate. And you want to also work with the apana, which is that downward moving force we talk about in yoga, where you're basically using those natural forces that are creating peristalsis. So that was something I wanted to get into. Sunlight. Should we get more sunlight? I think you need more sunlight. Is there too much? Absolutely. It's just like anything else in life. You can have too much water and drown. So you want to have the right amount of sunlight for your body, for your skin type. You don't want to fry your skin every day. You want to make sure that you have healthy skin. So you got to get the right amount. We recommend at least 30 minutes a day. If you can get full direct skin on most of your naked body, 30 minutes a day, I think you're in great shape. And you can do that even in the snow. We work our way up in the snow. We work our way up to being able to handle being out there with just shorts on. And it takes a little while, but you can get there and you can get out there for even hours after a while with just shorts on once you get used to it and get that sun on your body, even in winter. What else? We touched on thyroid. This fruit, I want to get on this, fruit feeding mold and yeast. And the answer is sure. Yeah. If somebody comes in, let's say somebody's full of mold and yeast, they suddenly start eating sugar and honey. Terrible idea. It's not appropriate. You really have to be aware of the individual nature of each person's history and metabolism. And some people have a much harder time with mold and yeast in their system than others. Some people switch their diet around. They sort it out. Their immune system takes over. Their microbiome sorts itself out much easier. Some people goes on as a year-to-year battle that continues on, and it's just a tough battle. But step by step by step, it improves. Some of the best things I've seen against Candida I really like certain herbs against candida, like pau d'arco, and I really like yatoba, which are two Amazonian tree barks. Other things that are good against candida is horsetail, which I like horsetail tea a lot, but somewhat of a toxic herb. But if you do it as a tea, you're killing off that B1 inhibitor. And then the other thing I would say about that is the right kind of probiotics. And the probiotics I'd recommend, I really like the kefir starters that Donna Gates puts out against really, really intractable candida cases. Seems to be one of the best ways to go. So those are some of my answers to the questions.
So I want to chime back in. Sorry, Clint, if you want to go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, going back to colonics, no, I don't agree with them. Why? Because we can test them before and after on the microbiome. It's dysfunctional.
Right.
Water is a drying agent to the colon. And so that chronic enema use, putting 16, up to 16 gallons of water, you're flushing out your microbiome. You can't take, if you go back to my microbiome lecture just the other day, I'll go into that in detail and I'll even, show you all these pictures, but you can't just take probiotics. You have, Alan mentioned, but you have about 4 to 5 pounds of probiotic in your gut. You have 100 trillion of over 1,000 species. And then, you go to a colon hydrotherapist, you flush out, and then they give you a little probiotic of like a 10 billion or something like that of a few species, if that, and it's not acid. And so you're not going to really replenish that. We're not meant to be going to like a Jiffy Lube and flushing out. That's just the whole, again, going back to this Western concept, like I've done really bad. I've not changed my lifestyle. I don't really feel like changing my lifestyle enough. So I just want to do this thing where I can kind of detox, cleanse, and, be with it and then go back to my lifestyle. It's like, no, if you're eating your whole food plant-based diet, you're getting your 35 grams of fiber or more a day. Detoxification is having 1 to 3 formed well bowel movements every day. That's detoxification on the simplest, most natural way. Having someone having to, and then with the coffee enemas, don't even get me started with that. We even have patients who were plant-based, used to be colonic junkies, and still get colon cancer, by the way. It causes serious dysfunction. And we can show right before and after, here's someone's microbiome being wiped out. Here's the inflammatory markers coming up. Here's even now through colonoscopy. So we test those things. Now, when it comes to fruit and yeast and all these other things, I have a different take on that. Because remember, we still have the phytonutrients, we have the antioxidants that come from fruits, right? Nature is kind to us. Everybody's trying to cheat nature or biohack the body. You can't biohack the body. You have to follow the laws of nature. If you follow the laws of nature, your health will be rewarded in kind. When you try to cheat nature, which is right now, biohacking is huge. I just saw the advertising the other day. Biohacking conference, go to Cancun, blah, blah. It's like, and all these people have terrible problems, but they promote things, they sell things, they look inflamed, they are inflamed, they don't look healthy, they don't feel healthy, but they're really big marketers. And I see all these people selling all sorts of programs and products. It's like, you have to go back to the simple basics. Are you eating the foods that feed your microbiome or not? Are you eating anti-inflammatory foods or pro-inflammatory foods? In my lecture, I have this one slide. I'll show it again on Thursday. There's one slide. You just look at the slide, it's pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, and you're just done. Like, you can walk away from any discussion from there on. You don't have to have science behind it. It's 20 simple things. Because if you understand that basic element of what causes inflammation and what doesn't on a food standpoint, then, there's no other, what do I need? What kind of product? How much sauna? This is all nitty. This is like wasting time. Because that's where people want to say, I just did this and I don't have to do anything else in my lifestyle, right? Like, everybody wants that magic bullet or smoking gun kind of thing. It's like, no, we shouldn't be having any of that. We need to change the epigenetics, and everybody's always looking for a quick fix. And at the end of the day, I would say, when we see like even cancer patients, like, oh, you can't have the fruit because of the sugar. No. Now, the thing is, I still want them getting whole foods. I don't want them getting like highly refined juices and stuff like that. And yes, to mention to David, if someone has a candida overgrowth, can some of these things actually make them feel a little bit worse? Absolutely. But do I restrict it out of the diet? No, we want it. We test for it. We look for it. We fix their microbiome. We fix the overgrowths or dysbiosis or their SIBOs or this. And we actually test for sensitivity and resistance. I don't just give what I want. I give what actually shows to be working, because the reason is everybody's taking things naturally more than they should. Everybody's taking natural oregano and uva ursis and berberines and all. This is all becoming more and more resistant. And we will find now on the test things that we used to use 10, 15 years ago very well, which were like a magic, here's a natural antimicrobial, right now is having a lot of resistance. So we always want to give targeted therapies. The reason being is because anything that's a natural antimicrobial knocks out the good sides as well as the bad. So everybody wants to think like a knockout bad stuff, good, whether it's a prescription, whether it's natural. But if you're not looking at that, natural antimicrobials are the same thing, whether it's coming from Pfizer or coming from the farm, antimicrobials, antimicrobial. People don't understand that because they think, well, I'm just taking this thing. I'm going to take this for 6 months. I'm taking my candida cleanse, my parasite cleanse or whatever. It's like, you don't take amoxicillin for 6 months, do you? No, that would be terrible. I would do that. It would destroy my microbiome. So why would you take the herbs that way? Right? Like we have to understand like the mechanism of action is mechanism of action. The problem is a lot of people want to just do natural things and say, well, there's no harm with that. No, I can give you poison from natural products, you know? And so the idea is like, it's understanding, like if you understand the science behind the body, or you have someone to help you with guidance with that, it makes it a lot easier. We don't have to have people have candida for years and years and years and years and years. They usually have biofilms. They usually have other things. If you disrupt that, there's a whole system of actually getting to the root cause of it and restoring that and then moving on. But the problem is a lot of people will suck you into this world of constant, like, I got to do this, I got to do that, come do this, come do that, take this, take that. That to me is a waste of time. What you want to do is you want to get to the root cause, fix it, solve it, and then get on to optimum health.
The question comes up about added salt. You know, you can, the same thing with salt, with sugar, with oil, you get the essential fatty acids you need from a whole plant food diet. You get the carbohydrate you need from a whole plant food diet. And you get the sodium you need from a whole plant food diet. All of these nutrients are necessary, but you don't need them in a fractionated form that's added to the food. And now people are kind of realizing, okay, you don't have to have added oil in order to get your fats, and you don't have to eat sugar in order to get your carbohydrate. And eventually they'll figure out you don't need to be adding salt in order to get enough sodium in your diet by eating a plant-rich diet that is naturally going to get you enough, but not too much sodium.
Cool. I guess I've left. I'll take grounding in water versus being equal to any other form. The thing grounding is really a challenge to understand because it's simple, but on the other hand, it's a little bit complicated. For instance, the issue, it has more to do with skin resistance than it does with the moisture of the soil, because the surface of your skin, like on your arm, would be maybe 5 megohms of resistance. Well, that's not conductive. On the bottom of your feet, on the average, it'll be 250K of resistance. That's more conductive, but it almost leads to what we call dissipative, meaning electrons they migrate into the body. They don't just rush in, but they migrate fast. And so the issue is being in water. Salt water is good. You're 100% grounded. You're gonna get significant benefit. But on the average, no matter where you live, if you put your bare feet on the earth and just stand there, you've got 100, 200 pounds of weight. So you have a good connection with the earth. There's moisture in almost everything, some amount of moisture, even in the desert, where we've done a lot of experiments in the sand. You know, there's still ground. It may not be, again, it gets technical, but we're talking about grounding a body. We're not talking about grounding an electrical distribution system or a cable system. But anyhow, the body doesn't need all that much ground. It just needs access to free electrons. It needs to be able to equalize with the earth and absorb electrons as they are needed, and or distribute electrons. I mean, electrons can go in or out of the body depending on what you eat, what you're doing, and so on. But it's maintaining your body with a negative charge so you have a significant or sufficient supply of redox potential to normalize the functioning of all body systems. And I wanted to throw out a couple of things too, just real quick. One thing we noticed in our blood studies, in the blood viscosity studies, where the blood separates and the electrical surface charge increases almost 300%. These studies are all available, by the way. And but one thing we noticed by accident was that a half hour or 2 hours after grounding and drawing the blood and looking at the blood before and after, we noticed that there's a significant reduction, if not a total reduction, in candida and fibrogen. Now, explain that. I mean, that has to do with a whole lot of things. But on the other hand, when you ground the body, you're putting a negative charge on. We've measured red blood cells, but we know that every other cell in the body becomes more negative also on the surface. That's why it's easier for a lot of people to get up when they're grounded, because there's this electro repulsion that takes place in everything in the body. This is weird stuff compared to what everybody's talking about. But anyhow, so grounding, any amount of grounding is good. If it's even in the desert, just kick a couple inches of sand away, there's moisture. But there's ground all around the world. And the amount of ground that an animal needs, or a human being, is not a whole lot in electrons, but it's absolutely, when you don't have them, there's real harm. But anyhow, the point is, any amount of grounding is good, and the body will absorb whatever electrons it needs and equalize with the earth quite rapidly. I mean, within nanoseconds. And we even put a 100K resistor in it to slow any current down or any flow down. You don't have flow with ground. What you have is equalization. You have what's the word? Distribution. I mean, you equalize. It's not a flow. You have to have a circuit. There is no circuit when you ground the body. The body is a dipole, and it's going to equalize with the earth and maintain a negative charge, meaning you have a reservoir of free electrons to reduce any of the radicals that are not reduced in normal biological activities. So, the whole concept behind grounding is very simple. I mean, our working hypothesis is very simple, that, grounding normalizes the electrical functioning of all body systems, and it does. And it returns when you restore the immune system, and the immune system returns the body to health. And you do need all the things that everybody's talking about here, but grounding is fundamental and it's overlooked. So no matter what you do with patients, I can tell you this, after 25 years, you're going to have better outcomes if you can get her to take the shoes off, spend 30 minutes on the earth occasionally here and there, especially at night after work.
Thank you. Okay, if you'd like to ask a question, please click the reaction tab and click raise hand. And then when we call on you, please tell us where you're from, okay? Ruth Lynn, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Hi, yes, I'm from Toronto, Canada. I have two questions. One question has to do with, okay, somebody said we shouldn't, the fasting business, eating at a certain times, maybe not eating after 6:30. But what if you get up in the middle of the night, and you're really, really thirsty? And also if you need to take, like, for example, let's say I take one of these activated charcoal pills in the morning, and I want to take another one at night. Is there a certain time when you should not be doing this? That's one question. The other question is about magnets. I used to wear mag steps that were magnetic devices. They were selling them also for sitting. They were pads that you could sit on, and or you could even buy something to put in your bed as well. I'm wondering if the mag steps, if the magnetic devices are of any use anymore. So those are my two questions.
I'll answer about the mag step, at least. I don't know about the beds, but on the mag step, there was data that was published that I actually reviewed a long time ago, looking at peripheral neuropathy of the feet. And there was a slight benefit in improvement of pain and the numbness. Now, it didn't reverse disease, didn't cure the condition, but it was something that was very simple. It was about depolarization of the cells in the feet, and it was having a little bit of this effect at giving them some pain relief with neuropathy. Outside of that, I can't answer that.
I can share one thing. Basically, when you stick a magnet on the body, your immune system is going to respond because there's a powerful field there that is not naturally there. So it's going to send resources to the site where the magnets are, and you're going to get in, and it's going to provoke an immune response. So it's going to clean up a lot of things that are going on there. But the problem with the magnets is, once the body recognizes, say, well, it's not harming me, it's not doing anything, then it loses any value whatsoever, because as long as it's not provoking or an immune response, there's not going to be any benefit. This is the studies that were done with the Army, and Veterans Administration.
Benny, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
How do I unmute it here?
You're unmuted, Benny.
Oh, thank you. From California. I wanted to ask David, I'm a cacaoholic, and I'm trying to find bulk organic cacao beans. I've been told beans advertised even as organic, especially from certain countries, may contain bad chemicals. Do you have any advice on that? And regarding plant-based, what percentage raw versus cooked do you suggest?
Great. Okay. I've been a cacao grower for 20 years. And so we've seen all the problems with the cacao industry, in particular, the way the beans are fermented, and they're just it's kind of a runaway ferment in most tropical locations. In Hawaii, you can't really do that. It has to be a controlled ferment because it's not hot enough. Hawaii is one of the coolest climates in the world you can grow cacao. And so we have to ferment in a controlled fashion. A lot of times we use champagne yeast or something like that. But then eventually we just realize we don't even want to do that at all. We just freeze dry the cacao beans. And then you get something that's really exceptional because the freeze-dried cacao has the pop and the crunch, it's like a real crunch. I can't even, it's hard to even get that anywhere. Maybe a good quality almond, you get that sometimes. And so that's really what I recommend. Now, that's a product we produce, certified organic and certified biodynamic as well. One of the only certified organic chocolate growers in America, and certified biodynamic chocolate growers and vanilla growers, and on and on and on with many other things that we do on that farm. So, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I do as the best I can to, if I have to get chocolate or cacao beans in from the Big Island, which are right here, there's some right there, or if I'm getting cacao beans in from Peru or Ecuador, we really have to do a microbe check on the quality, because they're, again, contaminated with mold due to the fact that it's just a runaway ferment. And typically, eventually I had to depend on Picari. Picari is a particular operation out of Ecuador that they do a hydrogen peroxide cleanup on their beans. And so that's really, what we did a lot of chocolate production with their beans, and was really phenomenal raw material. In fact, their material was so clean, the cacao bean. So just for everybody who is looking at this going, what's a cacao bean? This is the food that all chocolate is made out of right here. This little nut right there. You can see that. And if I peel the skin off, you can see the chocolate on the inside. These are a little rough. I hope I don't tear it apart. I kind of tore it apart. But anyway, there's the cacao on the inside there. This one's a little bit purpley. They usually are. And the chocolate on the inside usually has to be you have to peel that skin off in order to grind this nut on the inside. So chocolate really actually is a nut butter, and it's a nut butter that's had things added to it like coconut sugar or vanilla or lecithin or something of that nature. And it solidifies at a certain temperature around 78 degrees. Therefore, most nut butters you see are actually really very similar to the way they're made is very similar to the way that they make chocolate. We were able to, with Picari's beans, grind the actual skin on the outside into the chocolate, which is a very rare phenomenon, and no other chocolate company was doing it because they had no microbials that were low enough to allow that to happen, because almost all chocolate, 99% or more, is processed in the country of origins. So, for example, they'll grind it right there in Belize, or they'll grind it in Mexico, or they'll grind it in Peru or Ecuador or West Africa or anywhere like that. So that's a little bit about the background of cacao. We finally figured out the way to do it, which is you basically freeze dry it instantly. You open the chocolate up, you right into the freeze dryer, freeze dried, instantly packaged, vacuum packed. That's it. And that product is our Noni Land cacao beans. And unfortunately I'm sold out of that right now, and I'm probably going to have to go back to Hawaii to make more. So it'll be a few months. What percentage of your diet should be raw or cooked? That's really up to you. It just really depends. I like to get the predominance of my calories from raw foods. That's a way of thinking about it. It's a little bit easier to understand it that way. So you're getting more calories from raw foods. When you get more calories from cooked food, suddenly you get like, there starts to be some weight there, and you start going, wait, what's going on here? And then luckily when you fast, it comes off, which is nice. So that's how you monitor it. because the calories from the raw food is much easier to digest. It's the original food than when you get the calories from the potato or the sweet potato or the quinoa or whatever, else that you might be eating. Great question. Thank you.
Sophia, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, please. Hi from Canada. My question is for Dr. Curatola, please. I had a 3D campaign that revealed a sinusitis in the kiss and one infected root canal, which I removed, but I still have other root canals, and I wonder if I need to remove them all and use a partial, which I think seems to be the safest alternative. Also, as I removed my infected tooth a month ago, would it still be possible to see a specialist to use ozone therapy, or is it late? Thank you so much.
Yes, that's an excellent question. And root canals are notorious. They don't work. You can't sterilize a tooth, and you end up having lots of supercharged bacteria and all kinds of microparasites, viruses. I mean, I do microbial testing on removed, and we just had a meeting this morning about this. When we remove a root canal tooth, we do microbial testing on it. And it is frightening what is propagated around this and cultured in the human body. As I like to say, root canal is the only procedure where we keep something dead in the human body. We don't do root canals on femurs. We don't do root canals on gallbladders. We don't do root canals on infected appendixes. So what we thought was a good thing, we quote unquote, dentists like to say we saved the tooth, is in actuality a toxic tooth. So removing that infected root canal, if your sinusitis hasn't been cleaned up, they didn't adequately clean around the surrounding bone that also becomes infected when an infected root canal is in place. For people, there are root canal teeth that are more toxic than others. Molars, notorious. Bicuspids, notorious. Canines, notorious. Some of the front teeth, single-rooted teeth, are not as toxic, and there isn't that much around them. So we always test, because rather than ripping every tooth, and I have people that have shown up. I had a patient come in last week that had 9 root canals. And by the way, she had thyroid cancer. And where were some of the root canals sitting? Right on the thyroid meridian, which is an energetic channel that connects, every tooth is connected energetically to every organ system in the body. It's really fascinating. So my advice to you would be to triage which root canals are causing the most problems, and those are the ones that should be removed. I recommend getting them removed by a properly trained, biologic dentist. That's a dentist who understands proper use of ozone and disinfection of the surrounding tissue and not just the tooth itself. I hope that helps, Sophia.
Aaron, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I have another question for Dr. Curatola. With regarding to implant and bone graft, I went to a biological dentist that was recommend me to do bone graft from cow bone, and because I don't have enough bone in order to do the zirconia implant, I would like to understand what are your thoughts about this bone graft. Is it something that you would recommend to do, or you would recommend it to do a different bone graft? And if you have any recommendation of biological dentist around Boston area.
Yes, I can answer both of those. So the types of grafting material, and everyone just so everyone understands, when we graft bone, we really don't, stick bone in the place and that becomes your bone. Grafting is a process where we use a grafting material, and a lot of times it's a combination of materials. For example, in our office, we take blood from your arm, spin it down. We use platelet-rich fibrin from your own body, which has mesenchymal stem cells, which are cells, primordial cells that differentiate into the tissue. But grafting, the stuff we put in there is really a scaffold for your body to then use. The cells that make bone are called osteoblasts, and they make bone and they use that scaffold to grow on. So what types of materials do we have? Bone materials for the scaffold. Bovine bone, that's the cow bone. Porcine bone, that's pig. We have synthetic bone, which is probably the worst because it doesn't resorb quickly. And then we have human bone. And sometimes that human bone is a donor, like blood donor, bone donor, that human bone, or it could be taken from another site in your mouth, like the ramus of the mandible. The graft, my experience has been, the grafting material has been, that's the best, is the human bone. Believe it or not, the second best is porcine, because it resorbs the way human bone does as your body makes new bone. How these materials are processed becomes a question as well. So I always ask people where it's coming from. Is it irradiating? So they use radiation to sterilize the bone. They irradiate it. That is, to me, can be problematic. I hope that helps a little bit. So do your homework in that regard. I like to use autogenous grafts from other parts of the body. Sometimes we take from the hip, the crest of the ridge of your hip, if we need to take more bone. And good biologic dentist, well-trained biologic dentist in Boston area, Yuko Torigoe. Yuko, she's a Japanese American, Torigoe. I hope that's helpful.
Celine, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, please. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and my question is a dental question as well. I just want to kind of know what's possible in terms of remineralization of the teeth through diet and, possibly healing or reversing cavities. I've seen studies including Manuka honey or matcha powders that have shown some results.
So that's a fantastic question. And I'm going to try and answer it quickly so other people can ask questions. Teeth can remineralize and heal, not from fluoride. By the way, fluoride, as I said, creates an artificial mineral called fluorapatite. Bad, very hard, very brittle. You can remineralize. Remember, I said, I alluded to it earlier, make peace with your microbes, because in the mouth, the oral microbiome acts as an intelligent semi-permeable membrane that transports minerals from saliva to your teeth. What can promote that? Manuka honey. There's been some studies on Manuka honey stimulating remineralization. We're stimulating that process of your microbes transporting ionic minerals from saliva. I hope there are no more dental questions because I'm losing my voice. But if there are, it's okay.
Ed, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Yes, and I'm from Florida. The question I have is I had some lab tests done about a month ago and my sodium was low. I think they said it was 129. So they told me to take some salt. I did. It's 134 now. And so I haven't felt any symptoms from this at all. So I guess it begs the question is my sodium really too low, or is it just, according to, what they consider normal? And two, what's the best way of replenishing sodium if I need to do it? And I think I had a low sodium because I had tried a phthalazide for hypertension.
Yeah, usually when people's sodium is low, it's not because they're not eating salt, it's because their kidneys are being affected by their medication use or they're hyperhydrating. People drink, you hear about people that go into water drinking contests and flush out the sodium and get into trouble. So the low sodium in your case was probably from the medication, which is notorious for altering electrolyte balance. And what you want to do is get rid of the reason why you would need those hydrochlorothiazide pills, and then you're likely to see your sodium balance normalize. The answer is not just to give you salt, though.
Sherry, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
I would, thank you. I am in Delaware. My question is for the amazing Dr. Goldhamer. I am in my early 70s. And I am, let's see, I've got my BMI right here is just right around 20. Blood pressure 117 over 99. Oh, 79, I'm sorry.
Okay, much better.
Say again?
That's much better.
Yeah, 79 is much better. I've been whole food plant-based for a year and 3 months. And what I love to do is I'm whole food plant-based, SOS free, as we call it. And what I want to know is what is a reasonable amount of hours, if not days, for me to do a water only fast? Because, and I will tell you right now, my physician, the only one that Medicare will pay for, says you can't fast. That's crazy. She's a Russian lady. I love her. She's beautiful and she's overweight. And she's telling me that at 120 pounds, I'm too thin. And I'm looking at her saying, sweetheart, look at my bones. I'm 5 pounds over my cruising weight. Please don't fight with me. She's not helping me. Please help.
So, many people believe that if you got on a plane in New York and you flew all the way to California, you would die of starvation somewhere over Colorado, and that the only reason you didn't die is because you ate the peanuts or the pretzels on the plane. The reality is that even thin people are often able to fast. We've done a study recently with our colleagues at the Mayo Clinic that'll be coming out in the literature next month that looks at whole body composition changes in fasting. We used a DEXA scanner before, during, after, and on follow-up. And what we found was that during fasting, of course, people lose weight. Some of it's fat, some of it's water, fiber, glycogen. And after fasting, what happens is people regain their protein, water, fiber, and glycogen, but the fat loss continues. And that visceral fat is preferentially mobilized in fasting. In fact, the ratio is about 3-to-1. And so the consequence is that people fasted, if you look at them 6 weeks after fasting, their lean body mass is actually higher than it was before fasting. The fat loss continues, visceral fat preferentially drops. So a person that lost 20% of their total adipose tissue may have lost 50% or more of their visceral fat. It's actually the fastest way of preferentially mobilizing visceral fat that's been shown to date. So even a thin person or a normal weight person can oftentimes do at least moderate levels of fasting. And even if they're a little bit thin when they're done, assuming there's no other pathological issues, they're going to regain their water, fiber, glycogen, and protein without a problem. So what I'm recommending that you do is continue to fast every day for 12 to 16 hours. And then if you want to get a doctor that's maybe a little bit more supportive, you might go to True North Health and go to one of our telemedicine physicians that will work with you remotely through Zoom or for the phone, and perhaps they can augment the advice that your doctor is giving you, but coming from a perspective experience and one that understands the role of fasting. And if your doctor's willing to cooperate, we'll work with her so that she can learn more about how she could benefit her patients with appropriate use of periodic or longer term fasting. In fact, we can send her information and articles and other support materials. So sometimes we can kind of rub your success in her face, and that might motivate her to be more aware for her future patients.
VB, would you like to ask a question, and where are you from?
Hi, yes, I'm from Miami, Florida, and I have a question for dental spacers in children. A 9-year-old child having a tooth removed, that's a baby tooth, but because it had an infection, it had to be removed. Now, the dentist recommends a metal spacer to hold the space for the tooth, the adult tooth coming in. For a 9-year-old, I'm curious what Dr. Curatola suggests for those spacers. And then what's his take on the dental implants in adults? And then second question, what are the first steps someone needs to take in reducing ATPO, antibody thyroid peroxidase, when everything, all other labs are normal, but the ATPO, it's 6,000. Thank you.
Okay, so I will take the first part of that. First of all, the metal spacers are a very archaic space maintenance. Obviously, when a child loses a tooth prematurely and the permanent dentition is still forming, we do not want to have crowding occur from the adjacent teeth moving, because that will cause a malocclusion. The teeth will come in a bad position. There is so many better ways. First of all, I don't believe anyone should have metal in their mouth. Not even metal implants, which have now been shown. Titanium corrodes. There was a study that came out in July 2021 from China, and actually very well documented study on the distribution of titanium particles from hips, joints, shoulders, dental implants, titanium dental implants in liver, kidneys, lungs, and brain. Titanium implants in the mouth are affected by 5G. So you should never put, if you have a metal implant, you should never put your cell phone near your head. We use exclusively now zirconia or ceramic, what we call ceramic implants. Zirconia is actually a white metal, but it doesn't block meridian flow the way the metal does. And it also has a much higher biologic acceptance by bone and soft tissue. So that's the thing about dental implants. As far as your child with space maintainer, there are other non-metallic space maintenance devices. By the way, all metal saliva acts as an electrolyte and interacts. And by the way, the metal that's used in children's appliances for space maintenance, metal braces, it is a stainless steel. So, and it does have nickel and a lot of other alloys. So I really don't recommend any of that, and you can find alternatives. The ATPO, I'll leave to Dr. Goldhamer and Dr. Pai.
Okay, let's wrap up with, why don't each of you take 30 seconds to share any final thoughts you want to leave us with tonight. Each of you, or just a final closing 30-second summation of any final thoughts you want to share with us as we close. Any order is good.
Well, I'll be happy to start. I got 30 seconds, which is just real simple. Health results from healthful living. So focus on healthy living, focus on diet, sleep, and exercise. If you do that, you're going to be so healthy, you're not going to have to worry too much about all the details.
Thank you.
I'd recommend eating a whole food plant-based diet, an anti-inflammatory diet, number one. And taking natural anti-inflammatories, do things that will help strengthen your immune system, stress reduction. These are all things that are covered in my book, in Inflammation Nation. So those are the 10 steps, but they're simple steps. And you don't have to be perfect at everything. These are just changing your epigenetics, diet, lifestyle, environment, belief system. If you do that, in general, most things will always get better.
Dr. Pai, how do we get in touch with you? How do we get your book? How do we follow up with you personally? If we want a Zoom call with you, what's the best?
Yeah, so they can go to Sanjevani, SANJEVANI.net. That's our website. My book's available on Amazon, or you can go to inflammationnation.com, and you can get a signed copy, or you can get on. It's also on iTunes and Audible. So those people want to listen to it. It's about 15-hour read. And so they can call. We can do Zoom consultations for people all over, anywhere around the world.
And if they go on our website to your bio and click on it, it has access to your website.
Sure.
Okay. And Dr. Goldhamer, you still there, Dr. Goldhamer?
I think he's off.
Okay. Okay. Good then. Okay. Next person.
All right, I'll go. Just understand the mouth-body connection. I really recommend. I wrote this book because even dentists don't really share the importance of the mouth as a mirror. Everything, diabetes, AIDS, vitamin deficiencies, all show up in the mouth. About 85% of systemic disease has manifestations in the mouth. Understand your mouth as a mirror for what's going on in the body and a gateway, and make peace with your microbes. And my last words of wisdom, be true to your teeth, or they'll be false to you.
And Dr. Curatola, how do we follow up with you? If we want your book, if we want to speak to you, what's the best way?
You could go to Rejuve Dentist, Rejuvenation Dentistry is my office, at Dr. Jerry Curatola on Instagram. I'm always posting information. This recording is taking place during Oral Cancer Awareness Month. One person dies every minute from oral cancer. Third biggest cancer, preventable, and early diagnosis is key. Every dentist should have an early detection transillumination device. Most don't, maybe 1% do. We routinely screen with an early detection device. At Dr. Jerry Curatola, RejuveDentist.com, RejuveDentist. Thank you, Stephen, for doing this. It's a great program.
Okay, if they go to our website, to your bio, we have your access to your website.
Yes.
Clinton, how would your final thoughts?
My third? No.
No, Clinton, you want to share your final thoughts?
Okay. I don't have a whole lot to say. I think that's probably said everything. Basically, grounding is not well understood, but if you have any pain in your body, like an ankle or a wrist or anything, go put your foot or hand on the earth for 15 to 20 minutes and experience what we're trying to teach people. But most of all, it's simple, it's free, it's effective, it's 100% natural, and it's an essential component to maintaining good health. And everything else is important that everybody's talking about, but you've got to ground the body in order to reduce and prevent the oxidative radicals, the excess oxidative radicals from feeding the fire of inflammation.
And how would people follow up with you if they want to stay in touch with your products and your website and watch your movie again and all that?
I think it's all at where they have the bios. I think it's all listed there. You can go to ultimatelongevity.com or just go to the bio and get the information from there.
Great, thank you. Dave, your final thoughts.
One of the things that doesn't come up enough in these great meetings is that a lot of our health depends on a relationship. So I wanted to show a little idea that was given to me years ago that I really thought just nourished me a lot. This bottom here is your connection to God and your relationship with God. This is your relationship with the creation or with nature. And this is the creation. This is your relationship with other people. And when all three of those are healthy, you're healthy.
Great, thank you. David, how do we stay in touch with you and stay involved? What do we do?
DavidWolfe.com, DavidWolfe.com, or The Best Day Ever. All four of those words together, thebestdayever.com/links, LINKS. That's the latest of what I'm up to.
Okay, and also under David's bio, you can get a link to his website. I want to unmute everyone so the audience, we can all say thank you at the same time. So thank you so much for not just tonight, but for the 175 years that you all put in doing intense research so that you could share with us tonight, so we don't have to spend that much time learning it. So thank you so much. And if we could unmute everyone so they could say thank you as well.
Thank you, David, for what you just said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.